even the likes of Steven Spielberg feel this is important. Incidentally, if you can imagine how much money it costs to finance Steven Spielberg to make a 90-minute movie, if you can just imagine, if you contract with him to be the executive producer to pay for a movie that he produces, can you imagine how much money it's going to cost you? Because he doesn't go cheap. Well, he made a 19 hours television series. 19 hours. Somebody financed him to the tune of 19 hours for Steven Spielberg to make a television series called Taken, in which that was one of his most important subjects in his life, is this concept of aliens taking people. Not just reptile aliens, but the whole concept of other world entities coming and kidnapping humans. And so it was called Taken. Well, the movie Taken was actually comes from a book by Dr. Karla, a lady doctor, who was probably the best UFO researcher in the world. As far as I'm concerned, she was top of everybody, all the best UFO researchers. But Dr. Karla was, in my opinion, she was a doctor, some kind of a doctor before, but she got into the alien abduction subject, and her work was just phenomenal. I mean, she did some serious work on this whole subject of alien abduction. And she began to get into the connections between the U.S. government and alien presence, and how the U.S. government is working directly with the aliens. Soon after that, she was found dead, and her husband died later. Immediately after that came out, after she started talking publicly about the fact that the U.S. government is dealing directly with aliens and allowing these aliens to kidnap children, to kidnap people, kidnap humans, and are using them for experiments, she was found dead.
And we know that our government knows about this situation and is actively involved to the level of carrying out covert and illegal actions against its own citizenry. No matter what the truth ultimately proves to be, we have to go for it. I mean, without it, we're like children playing with shadows. And we're ignorant, and we're certainly unempowered to deal with and confront whatever the real entities are behind this masquerade. To take it all at face value is foolish. To take none of it at face value is ridiculous. Investigations into this field there cannot be anything more important for us to be doing right now than to dig past our wishes, dig past our fears, and dig for objective reality and understanding. Well, that's the sermon for this morning, folks. What I'd like to do with the rest of my time is to show you and make brief commentary on some of the illustrations and photographs from the women in Taken, and I'll ask the gang over there in the corner to start the video. And before you do, Craig, just a moment. Most of the video is of slides, of photos and drawings. At the very end of this, however, is an excerpt from a videotape one of the women in Taken made when she was having extreme military aircraft activity over her rural cattle ranch in Tennessee. And I might point out that mysterious deaths and cattle mutilations on that area during this time corresponded to those in Alabama that Linda has made us all familiar with, and none of which were explained. Even when there were no mutilations, the dead cattle were simply, all they could find was unknown toxicology, and it led in a year's time to a loss of $11,000 worth of cattle. So this is something pretty big for the family involved here. So there will be a little bit of video at the end of this. So Craig, let's go for it. This is the farmhouse in Indiana in 1954, Pat and her siblings and her mom. This is where the aliens abducted the family, and then the next morning the military came and sequestered them. This is the only drawing that Pat has made of later experiences. She called that little device the soul machine, and she sat on it and ran her hands over those little holes of different colored light, and she heard a sound they told her was the sound of her soul. I'd love to hear about other reports similar to this, if any of you know of them. This was also in the facility where she was shown the cloned body. This is Polly's drawing of some of the bulbous, wrinkled-headed aliens. She said they almost posed for her to get this conscious memory. You know how often they don't give you very much to take back consciously. And this kind of alien description has turned up in other people's reports. We'll see one more in here, in fact, in a little bit. From Lisa, here's one of her. She says, "I'm no artist. Don't tell me I am, because I know I'm not." And I think she did great for it being no artist to show the hooded figures. These are less frequently reported, but this one she was able actually to see some facial features where very often the hood completely obscures them. This is Lisa's drawing of another of the bulbous-headed entities, sort of similar to what we saw with Polly's drawing earlier. And these have been reported in a number of other cases as well. Not your typical gray or reptoid or insectoid, but something seeming to have more of a porpoise-type bulbous forehead. A typical gray in a hat, right? And this happens. I remember seeing one myself when I was quite young. She said this was surprising because its mouth would open, and we have a few cases where the little slit has actually opened. So just one of Lisa's representations. This one, she says, is very similar to a figure in Linda Howe's latest book with the flat, ridged nose area. This entity, she's not real fond of at all, was involved in what she said was one of the rape scenarios she was put through. Let's see what's coming up next. Lisa's drawing of the reptilian entity that was very aggressive sexually with her as well. And again, she says, please remember, she's no artist, but it was a brown, scaly, hard exterior with the slit eyes, vertically slit eyes, and clawed appendages or fingers. And a very robust entity. Symbols that she has seen in these, and this is so typical. I mean, we could flash symbols, and so many of them are some version of the triangle and the circle. We'll see another variety of this kind of symbol a little bit later with Angie's drawings. From Anita in Texas, this is a drawing of what she called the tan ones, and she makes a very big distinction between the tans and the grays. She said the grays could care less about us. They're very official or impersonal, but the tans seemed to go to a great deal of trouble to make her want to love them and to elicit love from her. She remembered at one point patting it on the face and saying, "Too bad it's not real." This is the drawing from Anita's granddaughter who lives with her of what she said were the mushroom men who had come into her room one night. These, however, she said were no more than maybe 1.5 to 2 feet tall. And you note the drawing details that she is included in 4 fingers and so on. Here's Beth's drawing in Puerto Rico of one of the doctors on board who dealt with her and her entire family in 1978 when they had a massive abduction. Jorge Martinez investigated a lot of this case. But it's only been reported in Spanish so far, so except for what we haven't taken. Widow peak hairline, very typical reported humanoids. When Beth recalled being taken by the military to a desert area where there was an above-ground compound area, much like what Ted described, being then taken again underground through this adobe or old-type structure into a room with military where she said 2 men in astronaut suits made a presentation here in this underground room to her and a number of other military people who had her there. And she was there not by invitation but by duress. So very similar to what Ted had remembered from the mid-'80s event in Albuquerque. We don't know where these facilities might be, but you know, Kirtland's not that far away. Here's the area of the rural cattle ranch where the mutilations and unexplained deaths have occurred. And you're going to see video from this area of overflights. I just wanted you to see how remote this was from any, you know, highly populated area. One of the unexplained deaths, this was not a mutilation, it was the report from the vet was unknown toxicology, and there were a number of other cases both in the Tennessee and Alabama area during this time. But there were also mutilations among the cattle on Angie's property. There's one that seems to be almost an interrupted mutilation. I'd love to get Linda's analysis of this. You see a triangular patch of skin has been cut but not taken off yet. The jawbone has been cleaned. It's like something either was human activity mimicking alien mutilations or an interrupted mutilation of some sort on a calf there. Angie's fetus, after an alien implant that she later miscarried, she actually retrieved the fetus, but under control, of course, took care of making sure it did not, well, it was retrieved by aliens, she believes, the day later, but she saw the size of it and the features of it. She said when they came back to induce the miscarriage that this was the instrument, the long instrument that was used to induce the miscarriage vaginally, and this little container was, she said she had no idea what the little container was for, but she did remember that also being present on the bed in her bedroom when they came to cause this loss of the child. And finally, Amy's drawing of some of the helicopter harassment that has plagued her and her family ever since she made contact with me and began working on exploring her case. And of course, many of us, including our family, have had this over and over and over. Amy's had a lot with the helicopters. Angie's had a lot with numerous military flights. So give a listen.
The second time it circled. It's February 22nd, 1:35 p.m. p.m., February 22nd.
10 minutes later, it's back circling. On the original, you can see some strange antenna display on these that don't show up as we've made the generation down copies.
Second, 2 p.m.
15 minutes later, it's back.
(2:15 p.m., February 22nd.
15 minutes later, it's back. Notice this tight
What could have uprooted a tree that big is beyond me. February 23rd.
This is the day after the repeated overflights. There had been rain, but no storm that night. If you notice, trees very close to this one are totally unscathed, except for two that have sheared off top branches and no other damage to smaller limbs around them. Perhaps it's just coincidental, but it was the day following all of this activity, so she wanted to include it in case there was a relevance. You can see there was living wood. It was not a dead tree, albeit this would make you think so. We have samples from the tree, and it was still alive at the time this occurred. See, the tree that close to where it was uprooted is totally untouched. But there was a cut-off branch on this top of this tree, and you see no damage to the smaller limbs around it, and the same with a second tree right there.